Can't tell if it's being recorded. All right, I think we're good to go. Okay, everybody, welcome to a special FF Metrics podcast. It is February 29th, 2024, coming at you guys in the late hours. I'm AndrewDFS, your host. Alongside me is RC Fischer, owner and founder of FF Metrics. If you haven't done so already, go check out his site, ffmetrics.com, to get all the latest scouting and combine notes, fantasy football advice, handicapping advice. You want it, he's got it. So definitely check it out. And then also really want to thank all of the people watching our videos, subscribing to the channel. Thank you. We've been seeing an uptick in the subscriptions. We love it. Please continue to do so. Leave comments, like the video, feedback. We totally appreciate it. So this week's show, we're going to go a little all over the place, hit all the major news items coming out of the NFL. And I think the best place to start is with the number one QB in the draft, or the consensus number one QB in the draft, who's grabbing all the headlines. Caleb Williams is skipping all of these medical checks in the during the combine process. I think he's one of the first QBs to do so. RC, a lot of people are starting to, talk bad about him, not really have him as number one. And one person I just want to call out, especially, is an analyst that named Merrill Hodge, who appears on FS1. He goes on Colin Cowherd's show. He was one of the only people to basically say that CJ Stroud is the only QB last year to have a first round grade, and he was like totally against Bryce Young. I mean, we both like Anthony Richardson and Levis, so we don't buy into that one fully. But the fact that he had Stroud above Young was great. So he came out, RC, and said that basically Caleb Williams, Drake May, he was pretty low on both of them. What are your thoughts on that?
I appreciate him kicking down that door. He was definitely one of the only ones. When I thought last year, when I started scouting Bryce Young, and I thought he was borderline terrible, not the guy that the entirety of the football community, from professionals to fans, thought was the holy number one quarterback. When I saw completely different, when that happens early in the process, I start wondering if something is wrong with me, that everybody else is seeing this thing. So when a guy that I respect like Merrill Hodge comes out and starts to see some cracks in the armor of a Bryce Young, then I'm like, okay, I am not all alone in this, and I don't need to have other people to confirm with me. But man, when it's like a billion to versus me, I started getting a little wondering if I've missed something. So the fact that he's come out with Caleb Williams, he was one of the first ones to start kicking down the door on Caleb Williams. And I'm starting to see others join that bandwagon. They didn't see that last year with Bryce Young. When you said something bad about Bryce Young, you were deemed a lunatic. This year, the anti-Caleb Williams train has got a couple passengers on it early, and with him skipping the medical checks, that may be a bridge too far for him. I think he's probably playing it correctly in his mind, and maybe it's all going to be smart, but he and his father are very savvy business people. That's why I don't think he'll do anything at his pro day. He's not going to do anything at his combine. He's not even going to do a medical check. That would be the advice I would give him and any top star. Don't expose yourself to any of these things. But not going to a medical check is pretty gutsy call by him. But I think there's starting to get to be enough people that are questioning Caleb Williams' ability, Caleb Williams' decision making on and off the field, and skipping the medical, being the first one to ever do it, could be that Jenga piece that gets pulled out that knocks the tower over, and he doesn't wind up going number one. I'm starting to hear more and more people, not a big bandwagon, but a bandwagon I wasn't sure was ever going to exist. A bandwagon starting that, hey, you know what? Why isn't Jaden Daniels considered the best? How is he not the best quarterback in this draft? Like why do we think Caleb Williams is the holy number one? I'm starting to see they tried it with May a couple weeks ago. There was a whole, is probably the best quarterback in this draft. That didn't fly. Nobody was buying onto that. I've seen that get shot down. May is starting to fall, as he should. But now we're getting to the, hey, maybe Jaden Daniels is really the guy. The guy just won the Heisman. He tore it up in 2023, where Williams did not. Look at their numbers. Look at their numbers against better opponents. Jaden Daniels was probably much faster afoot than Williams is. So I think Caleb Williams may be playing his way out of maybe too slick and playing his way out of being the number one pick.
I understand not throwing at the pro day, combine, whatever. That's fine. But the medical checks is a little strange. Not that I don't think he has an injury history like Penix would. Penix skipping the medical checks, that would kind of align with him getting injured. I think 4 out of the past 6 seasons or whatever that he's redshirted or had an injury season or whatnot. So I just found that a little strange for a guy that doesn't really have a bad medical history, to my knowledge, at least.
I know there's been some problem with the process, which I totally get. And I think Caleb Williams skipping it is actually smart, except for he's a little bit of a flawed prospect that people are starting to catch on to. And you got a Jaden Daniels that is an alternative. I think he may be, it's kind of like when Leonard Fournette was one of the first players, and maybe it was Christian McCaffrey, one of the first players that went, I'm not playing in this stupid bowl game. Why should I play in a bowl game when it's meaningless? We're not playing for the title. And I got to get ready for this NFL combine. I got to get ready for the draft process. The season ended, for some of those teams in early December or late November. Why are they going to wait a whole other month and still try to pretend to play college football in a meaningless bowl game when they can skip it, keep themselves healthy and safe, and prep for the combine? When that first happened, I can remember McCaffrey getting ripped to shreds for doing that he wasn't a good teammate, and this says a lot about his character. And I think they said the same things about Leonard Fournette. Well, Fournette and McCaffrey both came out the same year, so
both top 10 picks too, right?
Yeah, they got roasted for that. It didn't ultimately affect them, but once they kicked the door down, then all of a sudden there was a lot more, and now I don't even know if teams can even field a team to play in a bowl game. If they're not in the college playoffs, there's so many guys skipping, which makes sense. So Williams is being a trendsetter by not doing the medical, because I think they used to have, I think they've changed it up some, but they used to have, and may still have, they used to have every team doctor there doing the medical. You'd have to go through the same medical checks over and over and over again. And it's a waste. It could be a waste of time, a lot of poking, a lot of unnecessary thing. And if I'm Caleb Williams, I'm like, I don't want you to find out, they find out on those medical checks that, somebody has an issue with the heart valve, or, there's been instances where they've done that medical check and a couple players have had to retire from playing football again because they didn't realize they had a whatever. So Caleb Williams is kind of smart not doing it, but because he's the groundbreaker for this, I think they'll hold it against him, because the ground was already starting to get shaky under his feet of being the clear-cut number one guy. So I think the door is starting to open for Jaden Daniels. The door is starting to open for the Chicago Bears to go, you know what, we're roll
Trade
with
out.
Justin Fields. Well, we'll trade out if we can, but if we've got to, we'll go with Justin Fields and we'll trade out.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll hold the number 1 pick and roll with Justin Fields if they're going
That
to roll
would be
with
an
Fields.
awful mistake because they could get a king's ransom for that
You
pick,
would
hypothetically.
think, yeah.
Yeah. Unless everyone just starts souring on all these QBs, then I don't know.
If they start to sour on Williams, just think, May is starting to fall. If Williams starts to fall, and if they were already a little shaky on Jaden Daniel, then what is that number 1 pick worth? Are they going to get caught into the trap of going, you know what, all these quarterbacks, we're going to take generational talent, Marvin Harrison, and really blow the first pick? But I'll bet there would be takers for Marvin Harrison for the Bears to trade that pick. So,
for sure.
I think the door just got opened to Caleb Williams not being the number 1 by skipping this medical check. And I agree with his decision and his logic to do it, but it may cost him being the first pick. I think he thinks he's in a better spot than he really is.
Yeah, he's probably thinking I'm undisputed number 1. I don't need to do anything, but who knows? I mean, there's a lot of time between now and late April, so anything could happen. But one other person, RC, before we start switching over to people already in the league, one other person that's seemingly rising up in the mainstream media, and just like I'm seeing him in a lot of mock drafts and people talking about him in the first round, mid-first round pick, JJ McCarthy. And I don't understand this one at all, because if you just look at his numbers, I think he's only had like 1 game this season where he's thrown for 300 yards. And it's just, I mean, it's wild when you compare, someone like that had a season like Joe Burrow, for example, where you look at his stats and you're like, this guy's going to be a surefire first round
pick.
Or CJ Stroud against, I mean, all you needed was CJ Stroud's game against Georgia. If you didn't watch anything else, you watched that game, okay, against the best defense in the country. And it's funny, going back to Merrill Hodge, he said that in the past 5 or 6 years, the only surefire bets at QB have been Stroud and Burrow, which is interesting. But RC, what's your thoughts on McCarthy? Like, do you actually think this guy's going to go make a push to be the number 1 QB taken off the board?
Nothing would surprise me, because all it took, as we talked about an episode or 2 ago, all it took was for the last couple of years, JJ McCarthy was seen as a top 100 day 2, maybe early day 3 quarterback, crafty, but nobody was really banking on him being like a franchise quarterback. Going into mid-January, going into the Senior Bowl, nobody saw him as a first-round quarterback in mass by the consensus. There was, a couple people that were throwing that out there, but they're also the same people. Like every January, we start with 9,000 quarterbacks in the first round. We had Carson Strong was a first-round quarterback a couple years ago. Malik Willis was a first-round. Sam Howell, Matt Corral. I mean, people get a little crazy with whoever the hot quarterback names are in January and shoving them into the first round of drafts. So there's a couple people that had that with McCarthy, but most people were late 3rd, early 4th round type of a name. Then Harbaugh says one thing, that he thinks he's the number 1 quarterback, and suddenly the entirety of football analysis turns and pivots and puts him into the top 15, top 10, based on what? What has changed besides Harbaugh saying something? Which he deserves respect because of his coaching history and all of that. So it's not like it's a nobody saying something like this, but just because he said that doesn't make it true. I don't know what he's looking. I mean, I believe Harbaugh believes that because he likes that kind of quarterback. So to me, I don't get every time I watch JJ McCarthy looking to see if there's what does Harbaugh see that I'm not seeing. And I think it's that Harbaugh, and this is what scares me to death for Justin Herbert. Harbaugh wants somebody who's going to play under control, play to the playbook. He doesn't need to win via the quarterback. He wants to win via run game and defense, which is fine. But if that makes JJ McCarthy like his Alex Smith or something, I don't know. But the alternative would be, this is the Ross Jacobs argument, or a scout for us. Ross Jacobs is like, what if this is, when I mentioned, terrible stats and, he wasn't asked to do a whole lot, he stopped me in my tracks by saying, yeah, that's what we all thought about Brock Purdy too. So I was like, that's a good point. So, I mean, there's some precedent that a guy could come from a kind of a stiff Midwestern college offense that was heavily run oriented. Breece Hall was the lead punch for Iowa State back when Purdy was there. Purdy didn't put up massive numbers, but then he was just so good. I mean, he stepped onto the field and was a star from the first time he was thrown into a game. I still don't see that with JJ McCarthy, but I'm not going to close the door totally on the possibility. Brock Purdy has made scouts, or should have made scouts, makes me never want to close the door on anything, because I thought Purdy was interesting and decent, but I never in a million years thought he would step into the NFL and be one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league.
But look at his situation, RC. He steps into, his head coach is one of the best offensive minds of this era. He has he has A+ weapons across the board. He has a decent enough O-line. Like, he got into a great situation. But if somebody like, I don't know, the Commanders go for JJ McCarthy, like, he's not going to be, it's not even comparable to that. Maybe you'll have Cliff Kingsbury there. That's a little different. But, I mean, it's not even comparable to San Francisco.
Every quarterback Shanahan has had for the 49ers has flopped, has never done anything great. Jimmy Garoppolo the closest, but Jimmy Garoppolo was already pre-baked in an oven from New England, and he went to San Francisco and didn't really get any. Jimmy Garoppolo did not end up the way everybody thought he was going to end up when he came from New England.
But he still took him to the Super Bowl, RC, and they were one dropped interception away from a second Super Bowl too against the Rams.
But it wasn't because Jimmy Garoppolo carried the team and saved the day.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy literally dragged this team to the Super Bowl that should have got bumped out in the Green Bay game, should have got bumped out in the Detroit game.
Yeah.
And he single-handedly brought that team to the promised land and should have almost got them the Super Bowl win. So I think Purdy has made Shanahan look smarter than he is. Had Shanahan stuck with his brilliant Trey Lance plan, which is one of the worst trades and worst quarterback thoughts after we can judge that now after the fact. That's one of the worst quarterback things that has happened in the last couple of years. Fortunately for him, Bryce Young came along and has kind of made people forget how bad the Trey Lance thing was. But had Brock Purdy never existed, had the personnel department not taken Shanahan's plea to take him in the 7th round, and they went somewhere else with him, and they were stuck with Trey Lance and Sam Darnold and
first
Nick
round
Mullins.
Exit.
Well, it's possible Shanahan would be on the hottest of hot seats right now. I think the conventional wisdom is Shanahan makes Purdy. I think Purdy may have saved Shanahan's career in San Francisco.
I want to push
Trey Lance would have flamed after that massive of a trade, it would have taken away all of Shanahan's Shanahan out of his own mouth says he can make anybody an NFL quarterback. That wouldn't have been true. They would have traded a ton for him. They would have had losing records or 500 records, and they wouldn't have gone far in the playoffs if they dragged themselves there. The bloom would have been way off the rose on Shanahan, and he'd have been desperate trying to find a solution from the Trey Lance disaster and Sam Darnold maybe disaster that was going to come upon him. So I think Purdy's in a way different light and situation. Not that a halfway decent JJ McCarthy couldn't go to San Francisco and it'd be a better situation than if he went to the Bears or the Commanders. But even scouting Purdy in college, both Ross Jacobs and I watched him, especially 2 years prior to him coming out. And we're like, that dude can play. I've never watched JJ McCarthy and thought, man, that guy, there's a little something to this guy. This guy might be something. I've never had that urge watching JJ McCarthy play. He's not terrible. I just don't. If he's the number one quarterback in this draft class, this is a terrible draft class.
That's wild, and it's cool that like you and Ross both saw maybe what Shanahan was seeing in Purdy, because he was standing up at the draft table going crazy saying, get this guy. And lo and behold, with the last pick, Mr. Irrelevant, Shanahan got his wish, which makes me think how much of the Trey Lance move was actually him. If he has to like stand on the table to get someone in the 7th round, is he actually controlling the personnel decisions? That kind of seems a little weird to me. I thought he had full control of the whole thing.
I don't think he's got full control, but he's got a lot of sway. That's for sure. And obviously they made that pick, so whatever the rules are, whatever the sway is, they were trying to talk him out of it. More so from the fact that like we got Trey Lance, we got Jimmy Garoppolo. What are we doing taking another quarterback? Let's try to get him as an undrafted free agent. To Shanahan's credit, he's like, no, I don't want to risk it. We need to possess him. So Purdy kind of changes the rules on all quarterbacks, and JJ McCarthy looks competent to me, but when every time I watch Michigan tape, whether it's to watch when I was scouting Roman Wilson, when I was scouting some of the opposing cornerbacks for the draft, and I wanted to watch them facing Michigan as a top opposition to watch them play against. Every time I watch McCarthy and go, I don't get this. This he feels like Bryce Young to me. When everything is perfect, he's good. Not great, he's good. And obviously Michigan had a great team. So he gets a lot of protection. He gets a lot of play action time freezing the defense because they run. He had a great setup to be a good quarterback, and that's what he was. But when they got into playing top level defenses and he had to start making throws under pressure in muddy pockets, it's like with Bryce Young, he doesn't have the arm strength, the flat-footed throw or off his back foot make a laser beam throw. Justin Herbert can throw 100 miles an hour standing still with never putting his hips or body weight or anything into a throw. He can just zip it. Anthony Richardson can do that. Brock Purdy has an incredible release from muddy pockets. Bryce Young does not, and that was one of my biggest reasons for hating him last draft. I don't see it with McCarthy, and I don't see it with like Drake May. Definitely don't see it with Caleb Williams. When Caleb Williams is scrambling around and then gets free time, free space to throw, even if it's a crazy throw or a step into throw, it looks good, but that's not going to happen in the NFL. When you make Caleb Williams stay in the pocket and try to throw with pressure around him and he stays in the pocket, he's terrible. That's one of the biggest things I look for in a quarterback is how do they throw when they can't step in, when they don't have 4 seconds of pocket time, whether they scramble around and get 9 seconds of pocket time. How do they throw on a known passing down with pressure coming around them? Where do they throw? How do they throw when they can't get their feet set and going forward and they have to make these off script throws? I didn't see it with any of these guys from this draft class like you would have seen from Stroud, Richardson, and Levis last year.
RC, before we move on to the next topic, I'm going to ask you a question, but you have the right to punt it because it's a really loaded question. As of today, February 29th, 2024, if you had to pick one QB in this draft class, and I told you only one is going to become a Hall of Famer, this guy is going to hit. He's basically the CJ who has the potential to be the CJ Stroud of this draft class. Like which QB wouldn't shock you if they end up becoming the next Stroud, or even, I'm not saying Stroud's a Hall of Famer, but you get where I'm going with this.
He's going to be.
I hope so. He's looking the part in his first season, barring injuries, and hopefully the organization doesn't let him down. He's certainly on that path. But RC, who's that guy for you? Must have, you're a quarterback needy team. Like, who's the guy where you feel really good on? You have the right to punt it if you don't have the answer yet.
Oh, I'll give an answer. I'm going to give you a loaded question back on the next topic, I think. So
okay,
I'll throw you under the bus for a decision. This is all different possible questions to who might go on to be a Hall of Famer or who I might want to be my quarterback if I was the GM of an NFL team. Jaden Daniels might be my answer to the question if somebody made it to the Hall of Fame from one of these quarterbacks definitely made it to the Hall of Fame. Who do you think it was? I would default to Jaden Daniels just because I would think his running was so good that he kind of was a better Lamar Jackson and kind of a new age Randall Cunningham, something along those lines, and he kind of changed the game to a degree with his feet. If I had to take any quarterback from this draft, I would definitely, Daniels would be on the list, but I would not rule out Bo Nix, and I would not rule out that Michael Penix would be the best quarterbacks ultimately from this draft. And I would go a step further and say, if I was a team that was close, my roster was close, but it was lacking at quarterback, but everything else was, I'm not a dreadful Washington Commanders team where I need everything. I need 45 players, not just a quarterback. If I was a team,
Atlanta kind of matches.
Yeah, Atlanta. That's a good example. That has some hope. Or Tampa Bay. If I wanted to win this year, if I was Todd Bowles, who I think is under the gun that they would have fired if they didn't win that crappy division. If I'm like, I need to keep this machine rolling, and I've got I've got the players to at least win this division. Like, we've got to keep this thing going. I think Penix, if they all got an equal chance, that Penix would be the best year one. He's the most ready quarterback to step in and just start CJ Strouding away. I don't think he's as good as CJ Stroud, but I made a note of this a day or two ago. I was watching some more Penix tape, and I was thinking, who he reminds me of is everybody keeps talking about Caleb Williams as the next Mahomes because he scrambles around and he has a lot of crazy cool throws and all that. And I get that. But that's not most of what Mahomes does. Every once in a while he has to do that. Caleb Williams that's his default setting is to run around in circles and make throws. Um, but watching Penix, he is just relentless. I know I was scouting Polk, his wide receiver Polk and McMillan. So I got a whole dose again of more Penix tape. And I'm just watching him like he is absolutely relentless. He is going to throw, making bullet throws all over the place. And he misses on occasion. He's usually got the right read, but he either anticipates too much and leads it out too far, or he just takes the shot deep, puts it where only his guy can get it, but it's too far out of range or whatever. The more I watch Penix, the more I'm like, this guy is he's like a jugs machine, just throwing from the pocket. So it wouldn't
He was
shock me.
phenomenal, RC, against Texas. He played so well, but then the following week, I mean, you could tell he was kind of gassed the week after. So like my concern with him, number one, is the injuries, right? He has a checkered medical history. And number two, 2 weeks in a row, he played good defenses. He held up against Texas, but then the next week, 7 days later, he comes in and kind of falls flat against Michigan. I mean, this is what the NFL is going to be like, repetitive, constant 16 games, the consecutive games. Is he going to be able to hold up the entire season?
When I watched it live for about half the game, the championship game, I was surprised because I held Penix in a good regard, and I thought this doesn't look like the Penix. I thought he would be way better than this against Michigan. I also didn't know the context of how really good Michigan was. That's a heck of a defense. Um, but when I rewatched that game, it wasn't as bad as I initially thought. I thought Penix was pretty decent in that Michigan game. There was a couple spots where his receivers let him down. There was a missed throw by him where he just got too amped or too what he is a wide open guy. He's made the throw a million times and he just overthrew it. Had he completed it, it would have kept the drive going. It would have kept Washington in the game. And Washington wasn't really bombed out of that game until it kind of broke down in the last, I don't know, fourth quarter, last 10 minutes.
Close. It was pretty close.
So it wasn't as bad as my first reaction. So I just think he's the most ready-made passer that's going to walk in and go, just put me back in the shotgun and like CJ Stroud and let me get at it. So that's why I say Penix is the most Stroud-like, because he would literally walk in and throw a lot like Stroud. He's just not as talented. I don't see Bo Nix doing that. I don't see Caleb Williams at all being able to do that. And even Jay Daniels that's not his game. He's going to need to be a Lamar Jackson type. So,
yeah. RC, we gave the audience more than 30 minutes of you diving into QBs. Let's direct them to ffmetrics.com. If they're not already subscribers, you can find all of RC's breakdown for not only QBs, wide receivers, any position. You can find it on that site. RC's going to get really pissed if I ask him another question about QBs. You guys got to go subscribe. Check out that content. Even Ross posts on there too, so you can get all of their notes and all of their observations. So let's move on to the next topic, RC. So earlier this week, late last week, there's been some chatter that Justin Jefferson, star wide receiver from the Minnesota Vikings, could be had through a trade. So the Vikings are trying to make it known, maybe get some feelers out there on, hey, if we made him available, what would it take? And I think from their perspective, they're kind of looking at their team as, let's try to rebuild here, whatnot. They definitely need a QB with Cousins' status up in the air coming off an Achilles. RC, do you think that's the right move for them to move off of their best receiver that I mean, probably one of their best skill position players they've had since like AP Randy Moss, right?
I'm going to answer that question by starting by asking you a question, but really I'm going to restate an answer to your previous question of if I had to take any one of those quarterbacks, I wouldn't if I had full control and I didn't have to take them. I would try to trade for Will Levis with everything that I had. I wouldn't never be able to get CJ Stroud. I would never be able to get Joe Burrow. I would never be able to get Justin Herbert. I'd never be able to get Anthony Richardson. But I think I could get Will Levis. So he's the guy that I want from this year's draft. Somehow, some way, that's who I want. I think Will Levis is better than any of the guys in this draft.
Wow.
So you're making me pick. So when I vacillate and I go, well, Bo Nix and Penix and Daniels, I'm not really excited about any of them. I wouldn't want to be wanting a quarterback in this draft. And I think some of these guys are going to be good, but they're not. I don't think they're going to be great. So my question to you about Justin Jefferson is, if you were the Bears GM, would you trade the number 1 pick? Would you give it to Minnesota for their number 1 pick and Justin Jefferson, knowing you're going to have to pay Justin Jefferson?
No, I would not give the number 1 pick to someone in my division, because if we're wrong, it could happen, and Caleb Williams hits, I don't want him haunting me for 20 years. I'm not going to give that to Minnesota, just from that perspective. But if it was let's just say Minnesota was out of the conference, so I don't have to deal with that. So is it enough for me to get a wide receiver that's going to command $100 million plus a first round, plus moving down in the first round 13 spots? I rather, if I'm Chicago, instead of doing that and tying up my cap space to Justin Jefferson, $100 million, where I don't even have an answer at QB yet, I'd rather trade that first round pick and get like 3 first rounders and build my team the right way, as opposed to try to cheat my way through. I just don't think that Justin Jefferson alone can make the Bears Super Bowl contenders. They still need to figure out, they still have a lot more holes to address, in my opinion.
You hope, if you're the Bears or any team, you'd hope, even if you traded that number 1 pick for multiple number 1 picks, you'd be hoping that somehow with those number 1 picks, that will more likely not be the number 1 overall in the future. So there'll be 7s or 13s or 22s, whatever they turn out to be. You're hoping you could draft you could find the next Justin Jefferson. So I say, why not just go get the Justin Jefferson and pay him what he's, just like they did with Montez Sweat. Don't waste time trying to draft them. You already see how great they are. Get them in trade. Now, Justin Jefferson would have to agree to a deal to come over, but nobody's going to Chicago on purpose. So you have to trade for them. And so then you're either drafting them or trading them. Stars are not going to want to play in Chicago, in that weather, in that geography. They'd rather be in a million other places. And I'm sure Justin Jefferson would as well. But if I could convince Justin Jefferson, if I had the chance to get Justin Jefferson and Minnesota's number 1 pick, knowing that whoever Minnesota takes at number 1, I'm not overwhelmed by any of these quarterbacks, and maybe they get it right and they get a good quarterback. I don't even care if it's in division. If I can get Justin Jefferson and change my offense in that one move, Justin Jefferson to me is the kind of player, if I can possess him, I will pay him so I can possess him. I won't keep taking dart throws in the draft to try to find talent. I'm going to buy talent. You got to spend your money on something with this payroll. Justin Jefferson would instantly be the biggest star you have on your team. sell jerseys, sell tickets, he would be the center of the universe for the Bears. He would make them inherently interesting 2 seconds after the deal was announced. And then I would be looking at it like, if I swapped my first pick and got Minnesota's whatever it is, middle of the draft, I probably get a player that I'd rather have than at number one. So the swapping of the picks would be like no big deal. And then I get Justin Jefferson. Like if the Bears had Justin Jefferson, if they were the ones that already had him and he was getting ready to be a free agent, you would tell the Bears and I would tell the Bears, spend whatever you've got to spend to keep Justin Jefferson. He's that kind of there's only a couple of guys like that non-quarterback that you want to spend money on, like Tyreek Hill. So I would do that deal to get Justin Jefferson. Now back to Minnesota. I don't think there's any chance in heck that they're gonna let Justin Jefferson go. That would be one of the dumbest moves they could make, is to let a known megastar get out of their hands.
They would need a king's ransom for it, like 3 first round pick. I mean, that trade you proposed, Darcy, 13-1 or 12-1, is essentially valuing Justin Jefferson as 3 first rounders. I think that might be a little.
Well, maybe you'll get more for it. I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah,
sure. That would be the worst, maybe, exchange. But having 2 first round picks is great and all, but if they wind up to be Bryce Young and a random guard that nobody cares about, is Justin Jefferson worth more than that? Is the known commodity Justin Jefferson worth more than that? To me, there's only 2, maybe 3 wide receivers that I would just get a check out of my checking account and have it blank and say, you fill in the number, or what's the highest paid wide receiver? Now you're the highest paid wide receiver. I'll bump it by 5%, whatever you think the top wide receivers should get. There's only so many Justin Jeffersons, Tyreek Hills on the planet Earth.
If you go back and look at all the teams that have won the Super Bowl the past few years, like, they just don't pay the receiver. I mean, the Chiefs are the prime example of that, right? They got rid of Hill. If you tie your cap to a receiver like that, I mean, it just really takes away from all the other positions, because besides quarterback, they're the highest paid position. That's why I'm nervous tying up. What's Justin Jefferson going to want? $30 million a year? $35 million a year? That's a lot of money, man.
I'd almost give them whatever. You can't find elite offensive linemen available in trade. They're not in free agency. You can get good ones, but rarely are you getting elite ones. You're not getting elite corners. I'm just thinking I build my team through quarterback first, protect them second, defend via cornerbacks third, and then having a weaponized wide receiver group would be my 4th priority. And I think I can win without Justin Jefferson for sure. I think I can build a group right out of this draft that could be that group. But Justin Jefferson is one of the only players that would make me break the bank for somebody. To have an established star, to have there's no guesswork. He's an established star. Just in jersey sales alone, you're probably going to make back part of your money. Then I am not signing Justin Fields to a long-term deal. With that pick, I'll take Penix or Nix, or I'll do something. But Justin Jefferson, I would make a move for. But I think I'm in the minority of that, because I proposed that to Ross, and it's about keeled over of a heart attack, as we did. So I know I'm on the right track. When everybody disagrees, I think I'm on the right track.
Well, RC, you mentioned that it's hard for a corner to be available through the trade market, but there might actually be one that's available this offseason. Kansas City tagged L'Jarius Sneed, who's their top corner, but gave him permission today to start to start negotiating with teams for a possible trade. Now they did something very similar with Tyreek Hill a few years ago, so it's looking more and more like the Chiefs are not going to pay L'Jarius Sneed. And just for the audience to understand how important this guy is, Steve Spagnuolo, the DC for Kansas City, went on record saying that they started off the Super Bowl playing in zone, but Brock Purdy was so good against the zone, carving him up, that they had to switch to man. They had no other choice. And that's essentially what won them the Super Bowl. But why were they successful in playing man? Because they had a corner like L'Jarius Sneed to lock up, the San Francisco star receivers. And when you lose someone like that, a shutdown corner, which Sneed is, that's a big hit. So RC, my question to you, will the potential loss of Sneed sting more than the loss of Tyreek Hill 2 years ago?
First, I don't think Kansas City will let him get away. This is just part of the dance that they will do. But let's say that they were. So are you saying, would I rather have Sneed or Tyreek Hill?
So at the I'm
question?
Just saying which one would hurt the Chiefs more, because it looked, their wide receivers are really bad, but obviously they won 2 Super Bowls since Tyreek Hill left. Is L'Jarius Sneed, if we pull Sneed out of that defense, they're top 3 right now. You can even argue they're the top defense in the league. They're really damn good. Where do they end up without Sneed? How bad of a loss is this?
This is just me speaking. And the NFL powers that be might be different. I would be of the belief that I could replace L'Jarius Sneed easier, and that's in quotes, not going to be easy, then I could replace Tyreek Hill, because to me, even when they made that deal, Tyreek Hill is one of those players. There's only a handful of non-quarterback players that I can't believe exist on the planet Earth, and Tyreek Hill is one of them. You can't replace. There is no replacement for Tyreek Hill. As we've seen, Kansas City should have even never really been in the Super Bowl. Their wide receivers were so bad, limping them to the playoffs, and all the near miss losses and troubles that they had on. They brought Mahomes down to just being a average good quarterback in the second half of last season. How they won the Super Bowl is a miracle and opens the door to conspiracy theories and everything else. But their defense definitely led the way, and that was a lot of that was Sneed. So they're both super high end, but I don't think I can find another Tyreek Hill in his prime. But I think I could find a Sneed replacement. That's from a couple years ago. Today, I would probably rather have Sneed because it looks like Tyreek's about to go off the deep end. If I see one more paternity suit or person he slapped or getting divorced after 4 weeks of marriage, Tyreek Hill's about to Antonio Brown. He's like a step away from becoming Antonio Brown, end of career Antonio Brown. So I don't want Tyreek now, but a couple years ago, if I had the option of Sneed or Tyreek, I'd rather have peak Tyreek than peak Sneed.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill has definitely had his fair share of problems. Hopefully, for the Dolphins' sake, he gets that all figured out, because it's not looking too pretty for him right now. But I think
I think the Chiefs would have kept him, but they probably saw that, and they would know better than anybody. They probably saw that this was coming, and before they sunk all that money in, were they going to get burned by Tyreek's off-field actions? So
I bet Pittsburgh's kicking themselves for not trading Antonio Brown.
Well, they did.
Earlier, I guess they didn't get too much for him, right?
Earlier. They got a decent. Yeah, they didn't get a ton. It wasn't peak Antonio Brown, but they definitely fleeced the Raiders. That's for sure. They
Did
got
they
a
get
bunch
a?
of 2s and 3s,
Okay, I didn't know if they got a
if I
first
remember
or not.
correctly.
Yeah. Um. Okay. Well, RC, I think we'll be remiss if we don't talk about Aaron Rodgers. So there's a couple QBs coming off an Achilles injury, Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers, and it seems like everybody's getting back on the Jets bandwagon again. RC, what are your expectations for Aaron Rodgers this year?
Uh, Physically, just focusing in on the Achilles, I assume that he will be fine. The modern technologies of surgeries and all of the stem cell advancements make these injuries like go away and the players are back better than they ever were before. It's almost like if you want to be a really good running back, blow your ACL out and get the new surgeries and stem cells, and you'll be faster. You'll come back in less than a year faster than when you left the NFL. I was listening to Aaron Rodgers talk about his surgery and rehab and all of that with Joe Rogan, and I was just my jaws dropped just listening to him talk about the new surgical techniques and getting the stem cell injections. And then all of a sudden, you thought Aaron Rodgers was literally done for a calendar year, and in less than 4 months, he was back practicing. That's insane. Achilles used to mean the end of your career because you would never come back the same, especially if you were a skill position player. But now you come back from it in 4 months, six. This is a 40-year-old quarterback coming back from it in 4 to 6 months. So he even admits there was no chance that he was going to play. But the fact that he was even able to get out and practice and try to give it a shot is stunning. So he said that he shared. I don't know if he said it or Kirk Cousins said it, that they collaborated about their Achilles injuries. So they're going through the same procedures and processes to get ready. So I assume they'll be back and be fine from the Achilles standpoint. And then whether the Jets are going to be any good or not, you've got a potential top defense. You had a Jets team that wasn't terrible, and when Zach Wilson was on, it was a decent team. If you put crafty veteran Aaron Rodgers there, a full year of Breece Hall, if they can get any type of offensive line going, I don't think you can rule them out of being good, whatever good's going to mean, wild card, contend for the title. Their offensive line is so bad, and their coaching staff to me is horrible. So I don't see it. I'm not going to bet on it, but I'm not going to rule it out because
I
their
could see
defense is
them.
so good.
Yeah, their defense is amazing, but I could see them getting off to maybe a hot start, but then fading as the season goes when the games get a little tougher and coaching staff needs to adjust or whatever, and they can't really out scheme the other coaches. So we'll
If
we'll see what happens.
if they go another year getting more defensive players instead of building that offensive line, like rehauling it and getting 5 starters, whether that's 3 from free agency and 2 from the draft or vice versa. If they don't overhaul that offensive line, seriously throw resources at it, then
They have no shot.
Rodgers will get hurt in some other manner,
Yeah.
or he won't have enough time to throw to make the offense go. And when you got that monstrosity of a offensive coordinator, former head coach, uh, that we all got to see on display in Denver, Nathaniel Hackett, when that's your offensive coordinator and you're asking him to come up with coordination of the offense, you're in a lot of trouble because all he's doing is playing cards with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is running that whole thing, but Aaron Rodgers can't draft and sign an offensive line. He can point them in the direction of wasting money on Dalvin Cook, but he didn't know anything apparently about an offensive line, or he would have been clamoring that they buy offensive linemen.
He took it for granted in Green Bay. RC's always had a great line in with the Packers. So, moving to the next topic, we've had two players already franchise tag, L'Jarius Sneed and T. Higgins. RC, there's some other candidates that could be coming that could be tagged in the coming days. I mean, top of mind, maybe Antoine Winfield Jr. from Tampa, Matabike, the defensive tackle from Baltimore, and even Jalen Johnson, the Bears star corner. RC, who are the people that you're kind of watching as the franchise tag deadline looms? I think it's March 5th as the cutoff date for this.
I will assume all of the big names, Matabike, Jalen Johnson, Wilkins, Sneed, there's no way they're not going to stay with their current team. However, that's tag and then sign before the tag becomes official or whatever it is that they do. They'll sign those players. It's a slam dunk. There's no way they'll let the really high-end ones are going to go. The ones that I'm watching of the bigger names that I'm interested to see if the teams will really let them go. Mike Evans, I can't believe Tampa Bay won't blink and pay Mike Evans after the year that he had, but they really turned their nose up at him in the offseason when he wanted a renewal, because I think they started to see him falling down. He ended up having a better year in 2023 than he did in 2022, but later in the season, we started seeing that dropsy Mike Evans back. Mike Evans is a wide receiver I wouldn't invest in. Most wide receivers I would not invest the sun and moon and stars in. But for Justin Jefferson and maybe peak Tyreek Hill, I would. But Mike Evans at his age and all that, I'd let him go. And I really don't know which way Tampa Bay is going to go on it. Then the only other one that I'm thinking that they might let go among the big names is Jacksonville letting Josh Allen go, which I hope they do, because these teams need to stop drafting all of these edge rushers, and they need to stop paying all of these edge rushers $1 bazillion in free agency to come in and get 11.5 sacks and have 557 other snaps that they don't do anything on but get blocked way out of the play and offer nothing to the team on. So that's my plea to the NFL. That will never happen. Maybe even 5 or plus years they'll catch up to it, but
it'll be interesting to see whether they tag Winfield or Evans, though. Tampa has a pretty big decision in that regard. I mean, it's not like they can't lock up both, but it just feels like if they're going to give Baker the contract and they're going to run the team back, like, it's possible that they give Winfield the extension and tag Evans. I don't know. I don't know what the right call is there.
I think they'll have Baker, they'll have Winfield, and then they'll go out and they'll either elevate Godwin into that bigger role. Baker won't care. It's not like Baker doesn't have a ton of options of who's going to pay him as much money as Tampa Bay will. So he's not going to say, well, I'm not signing here unless Mike Evans is back.
Yeah.
I think he'll take his pot of gold and wish Mike Evans well. It's about getting his pot of gold first.
No other team's going to give him $30 million plus, and he might even get the Daniel Jones contract too. He might point to that and say, "I want 40," and I don't think Tampa has much choice.
Yeah, he'll he'll get some money. Um, he'll get some offers, decent offers from places, but I don't. Tampa Bay is going to meet and beat anything anybody else offers. And then if with the money that they have remaining, if it's Winfield versus Evans, I think they'll maybe lean Winfield just because Todd Bowles is so high, so much more defensive oriented. But if the GM has more sway, then maybe they'll do Baker and Evans and find any other number of safeties in the world to go play. I would never pay a safety. I wouldn't franchise tag them. I wouldn't pay them. I'd use them up and just draft another safety or pick one up off the street.
Yeah. Well, RC, we're getting towards the end, but I think we should talk about one more topic. And this is something you called out, and unfortunately, there was no betting market for it at the time. But you're you're probably the first person to say that Steve Wilks is going to get fired right after the Super Bowl. I remember you saying that right at during our like Super Bowl betting preview show, etc. And Albert Breer went on John Middlecoff's podcast. John Middlecoff is a former scout, used to be in front office for NFL teams, and basically said that 3 minutes after the Super Bowl was over, Breer got a text from a 49ers coach that Wilks was getting fired, and it was all tied to that timeout that Kyle Shanahan took to get the defense into the right cover. That famous timeout, I think on like 3rd and 4 or whatever, to get the defense in the right formation or whatever. That essentially sealed the deal for Wilks. RC, I'm sure this news doesn't surprise you, but the fact that a 49ers coach knew 3 minutes after the Super Bowl that the guy was getting fired is pretty wild.
Well, I would have said, and probably did say, if San Francisco lost any of their playoff games, and man, they should have never got to the Super Bowl. But had they lost to Green Bay, Wilks would have been fired after that. Had they lost to the Lions, Wilks would have got fired out. Wilks was going to get fired. You and I and Chris talking about betting on such things. I was talking about how bad the 49ers defense was when people still thought it was this dangerous defense to try to avoid. I was showing how bad they were in the second half of the season, and that a lot of it laid at the feet of Steve Wilks. And it only got worse as the season went on. And then look what Green Bay did to him. Look what Detroit did. If Detroit's wide receivers didn't all of a sudden get a case of the drops in the second half, it would have been another team planning, having their way with the 49ers defense. I mean, the 49ers defense was embarrassing against Green Bay. It was embarrassing against the Lions. And it was started out decent in the Super Bowl and then ultimately relented, plus that timeout and all that. But Wilks was going to be gone no matter what. I had said even if the 49ers win the Super Bowl, that Wilks was going to get fired. So the fact that they lost made it that much easier. I don't know if they would have had the guts to do it if they had won, but I think Shanahan would have. The looks on Shanahan's face sometimes with what was happening with the defense, he looked like a guy, and Shanahan's not a big meddler. He wants the defensive coordinator to run that. Kyle Shanahan wants to play with the offense. You guys take care of the defense. The looks on Shanahan's face during the second half of the season at some of the defensive lapses and coverages and everything else, and knowing that Wilks, to me, is not a very good coach, it was coming, so it happened. So if they want to use the timeout as the excuse, whatever they want to use for the excuse, Shanahan was going to pull that trigger. You just look at their numbers as the season went on to see how bad a job was being done.
RC, I always tie that collapse of the SFD to losing Hufanga. Do you think one player could really be that big of a difference, or was it just more of like a scheme collapse?
It doesn't help, that's for sure. But at the same time that they did that, they went out and they did the big Chase Young move. They um,
Too
didn't
bad they
mention.
didn't get Montez Sweat. I mean, if they got him, it could have been a different story.
Um, that's what I say. The Chicago Bears were somehow to figure out a way to have both Sweat and Justin Jefferson. That would be something. Um, so the 49ers would be better, would have certainly been better with him at safety, but I don't think that was the breaking point. I don't think that was the player that made everything start to fall apart. I think they got some easy draws on the schedule early on that made them look better than they were, and then got exposed as the season went on and the schedule got more complicated.
Yeah. One other thing that's top of mind for me, too, just thinking about the 49ers, if Trey Lance somehow, someway was the starting quarterback for this team and basically did what Brock Purdy pretty much accomplished this season, everybody would be singing Trey Lance's praises. They'd be calling Kyle Shanahan a genius coach. But the fact that Purdy was the one that took him that far and carried the team almost, like, he gets no credit for that. And I bet you if they lose that Detroit game, they lose that Green Bay game, whatever, not only Wilks is gone, but I think Purdy's job, just from the sheer noise from the media, if he throws a pick six to end that Detroit game or Green Bay game, there's a good chance that San Francisco's in the market for a QB, maybe even Cousins.
I don't I don't think so. The fans would go crazy. The TV people would go crazy. They were trying to get rid of Brock Purdy middle of the season when they were undefeated and lost in the rain on a missed field goal to the Cleveland Browns. They wanted Purdy gone because he lost that game when it wasn't him that lost the game. Wasn't his best game, but was they he got them to the comeback victory, but Jake Moody, who was awesome in the Super Bowl, was not awesome at that point in time. They want the collective they of football will not have Brock Purdy being this good. It's like if you gave every scout, if you gave every GM, we'll start with the GMs. If you gave every GM the choice of Brock Purdy or Bryce Young, 30 of them would probably still go with Bryce Young.
That's
That's how
wild to
bad
me.
that's how bad football scouting is, because it's not scouting, it's all emotion. The two teams that would have said no, we're going with Purdy, would be San Francisco. I think Kyle Shanahan knows exactly what he's got, and he ain't changing to Kirk Cousins because Brock Purdy is better than Kirk Cousins. Certainly cheaper and younger, so you'd be crazy to go to Kirk Cousins over Brock Purdy. I think the only other team that, if given the choice, um, Purdy versus Bryce Young, well, probably David Tepper would probably make that choice, but he's so stupid he probably wouldn't. But the only other one that has half a brain that would see it as the most obvious thing in the world would be Sean McVay.
Yeah.
I think
I mean,
all the other 30 teams posed with that question, they would take Bryce Young.
that's
And
wild.
that's the NFL. That's
Put
why I
Bryce
say
Young. What's San Francisco's ceiling in your opinion? If Bryce Young was the QB, not Purdy, do they even win
oh
the division?
no,
Wow. A
no,
lot of people, I mean, their argument was, oh, anybody can go behind there. Darnold would lead them to the division win as their justification to why Purdy looks so good. So I think I'm with you, RC. I mean, San Francisco's so good that I wouldn't want to rule them out of a wild card spot, but I think that the Rams could easily. Oh man, Aaron Donald chasing Bryce Young, that that would be fun to watch.
they these are the same people who, when Purdy got a 2-game losing streak, and one of the losses not his fault, They wanted to run him. They wanted to replace him with Darnold. I think they had a 3-game losing streak in the middle of the season. And I think Colin Cowherd I can't remember if it was Colin Cowherd, but when I say even Colin Cowherd, I'm giving him respect as he usually knows what he's talking about, but he's kind of lost his fastball the last several years. But either guests on his show or him and the guests were all trying to replace Purdy and to go to the great Sam Darnold, which would have been a complete disaster had they done it. But when Houston faced Carolina, when Carolina hadn't won a game yet, and they actually beat Houston, and CJ Stroud had not his best game, and Carolina actually won, the football analysts called that the turning point and proof that Bryce Young is better than CJ Stroud. That was their reality week 6 or 7, whenever that game happened. Those are the people making decisions every day on who they like and who's in the it club and who's in the out club. And Brock Purdy makes them all look so bad. They should choke on that Bryce Young scouting. Many writers that are analysts should be fired for endorsing Bryce Young the way that they did. And I think that Ryan Poles is on the hottest of hot seats as the general manager of the Bears. Here's the we pick and choose the narratives we want to embrace, or the football collective mind chooses things that have a yin and a yang, a plus and a minus. Whatever it is that they want to push, they can find the pluses in the situation, or they can find the minuses to tear it down. The world thinks Kyle Shanahan made Brock Purdy. The same world also thinks Ryan Poles is a genius for trading that pick and not taking Bryce Young, that he's a genius. I say that was one of the worst blunders in NFL history by a general manager, because you had CJ Stroud right there that you could have took. The fact that you did all of your scouting and didn't see the obvious that CJ Stroud was there for the taking, and you didn't take him, and then you could have traded Justin Fields and gotten draft picks. You could have gotten stuff for Justin Fields, but then you would have possessed CJ Stroud. Their scouting had them avoid CJ Stroud for either Fields or for Bryce Young. They would have took Bryce Young had they kept that pick. So to me, Ryan Poles is on the mega hot seat. If he trades Justin Fields and drafts Caleb Williams, which is why I don't think they're going. I don't know how. I don't have any special insight. I just don't think they're going to have Caleb Williams as their quarterback, because if they get it wrong, Ryan Poles is done. That will be two colossal. How could you screw up 2 number 1 picks?
And this is the franchise that has the history of taking Trubisky over Mahomes. So let's not forget that too. So that wasn't on Poles, but the fan base, the owners have to answer to that. So if Poles misfires, he's done. I mean, yeah, you're right. He's on one of the biggest hot seats of the NFL. But RC, I don't know. I think passing up on Caleb, just considering how well he's regarded. I know some people are coming out of the
if he takes them and flops, he's going to get fired.
But what if the owners, say you're taking, how much do we know that maybe the owner said you're either taking Bryce Young or you're trading back. You're not taking CJ Stroud with the number 1 pick. How do we know for a fact that the owners don't interfere in a decision like that?
Oh, they always do.
We know Tepper does, but I don't know what the Bears organization does.
I don't know that the Bears do, because they're owned by a conglomerate. I don't even know who the lead voice is. I don't think it's any type of egomaniac like Tepper or Jerry Jones. So I think this is all on Ryan Poles. And even if I thought you were going to say, well, what if they told them, go ahead and draft Caleb Williams? We're not going to hold it against you. We realize quarterbacks need a year. Even if they gave that sentiment, I'm sure that's what Frank Reich probably thought. He probably closed on his house in Carolina. He's like, family, we're going to be living here for at least 5 years, if not 10, because, I'm here. We got a young quarterback. He's the number one pick. This is going to be good. We're going to be here for a while. And, Tepper's going to understand, if we get out to a good start, great. If we get out to a slow start, then, everybody's going to understand these young quarterback. Nope. Gone. Doesn't even get a guy with all kinds of experience. I could see Nathaniel Hackett being so horrible in his first shot at being a head coach, and you see how bad that it is that you just pull the plug. They did it with Steve Wilks. They did it with Nathaniel Hackett. But for an established guy that's supposedly respected and knows the game and all that, like Frank Reich, to get the plug pulled on him because Bryce Young was so horrible. If Caleb Williams goes to Chicago and flounders, everybody's gone. So this is a major, major, major pick by those two. Ryan Poles will never be a GM again. He'll go down in history as one of the worst GMs ever for passing on Stroud and then giving away Justin Fields. Imagine if they take Caleb Williams and Caleb Williams flounders. He might not be Bryce Young bad, but he just flounders around, and Michael Penix or Bo Nick or whoever, somebody's better, because C.J. Stroud being that good also pushed Frank Reich out the door in a backwards way. But what if they not only get Caleb Williams and it flops to some degree, and he's obviously doesn't end up being the best quarterback, maybe Jaden Daniels does, then people are going to say, well, why didn't you take him? But what if then Justin Fields goes to Atlanta and Atlanta wins their division and all of a sudden Justin Fields is really good? How terrible of a coach and GM are you if you constantly make the wrong? You missed out on all of these great quarterback opportunities, whatever they might be, whether that's Justin Fields, whether that's not taking Jaden Daniels, it's definitely not taking CJ Stroud. So these guys could go down in history, especially the GM, as one of the worst ever. That's a lot of pressure.
RC, they have the NFL world on their fingers. Just considering how much draft capital they have, they're going to dictate the flow of this draft. They dictated the flow of the draft the year before, and all eyes are on them because they have a chance to set themselves up for the next 10, 15 years. And if they blow this opportunity, man, the fan base, the owners, the GM, they're all going to be livid. It's going to be something to watch.
If you asked 1,000 people that are all connected to the NFL, scouts, personnel people, owners, players, you took just a random 1,000 out of the community and asked them a certain question, and you also asked the same question to 1,000 random Bears fans and then 1,000 random all other teams fans, and you asked them, how good of a GM is Ryan Poles? They would all agree he's a good GM, and they would cite the Bryce Young trade as the reason why. Nobody is thinking about the lost opportunity, or rare is anybody thinking about the lost opportunity of why didn't he take CJ Stroud. He's going to get that one mulligan. If he gets this next one wrong, whatever wrong ends up meaning, he's done. And it's going to be embarrassing. And he's going to have to try to find a job in the NFL.
So the silver lining there for the Bears, even if they go Caleb Williams, RC, they have plenty of cap space to shore up that offensive line. They could add a lot of talent around them. And I'm not going to I'm not going to sell Shane Waldron short. I think that they could, whether or not Caleb becomes Stroud, that's probably not happening. But could Caleb be better than Justin Fields? Potentially. I don't think that's out of the question.
And I say if you're not sure as an evaluator, if you're like, well, Justin Fields has these pros and cons, Caleb Williams has these pros and cons, plus he's, a lot younger, more inexperienced, whatever. Justin Fields has been with us. We know him. If you're like going back and forth with the pros and cons list, to me, you're almost backed into a corner with what the Bears have for coaching staff and GM, that they should just stick with Justin Fields and go down with the ship on something that they know, that they have worked with, that works with DJ Moore, that was starting to click in the second half of last year. Even if it hurts you fiscally, it doesn't matter. As I proposed that to Ross Jacobs, and he had another coronary when I proposed it, that it'd be better to keep Fields and not play around with Caleb Williams. And he's like, oh, you got to reset it for the money. It's to be so cheap. But that's great, but not if Caleb Williams is no good. Then it doesn't matter. You can get Carolina's not sitting there going, man, what a bargain. Thank God we have this great opportunity with Bryce Young being so cheap of a quarterback. They're like,
okay, but Caleb is not
sued?
Bryce Young, right? Like, come on, we could say that. That's not. He has it. If Bryce Young had a 5% chance of being successful, that's pretty much what you would probably pegged it last year. You have to think that Caleb is at least like 20, right?
Yeah,
or do you think
I'd say it's something in that range because he can scramble around where Bryce Young couldn't.
He doesn't have the stature.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the team, the environment. Chicago, potentially, it's not there yet, right? We don't know what they did in free agency yet. But if they get the right weapons for Williams and the offensive line, they try to shore that up, whether that's pick 9 or free agency, I'll be a little bullish on them. And I'm with Ross, RC, on the fact that if you pay Justin Fields real money, I'm talking like $40 million a year.
But I'm not paying him. That's part of the deal. I'll deal with that next year. I got to get through this year and see if I'm still going to have a job. And if Justin Fields does really well, you're going to have to pay him, and then you'll be kind of okay paying him because it worked.
In that scenario, RC, I don't think that a team could pay Justin Fields $40 million, even if he did good this year, right, and win a Super Bowl. I think that if you give him real money and pull away talent at other positions, he doesn't have enough in him to overcome a team as opposed to someone like Mahomes. Obviously, I'm going to all the way at the other end of the spectrum, where you can take away Tyreek Hill. You can pull away pieces of his O-line. He'll figure it out. Same with Joe Burrow. You can pull pieces out.
There's Burrow and Mahomes, and then who?
That you can start pulling pieces away. And really, if you don't, Herbert's another one that I feel like in the right situation, you start pulling pieces away, he can overcome. Okay. He has that talent. So my philosophy is,
I'm saying you'll tap out, you'll run out, you'll max out at about 4 or 5 quarterback names, maybe 6.
I don't want to pay Daniel Jones $40 million. I'd rather let him walk.
We don't want to do that.
Fields is in that class.
You don't want to do that, but there's 25 of those situations, and there's 7 of the other situations in the NFL. I don't want to pay Derek Carr. I don't want to pay Baker Mayfield. I don't want to pay Matt Stafford. I don't want to pay a lot of guys that when you think about, I'm the general manager and I'm building this. This is the mistake that like fantasy dynasty owners make. Like constantly building for this, constantly taking shots at this future where you're gonna find the great player at the cheapest cost. So you're just going to keep getting rid of everything else, which I understand that you go, well, I don't, Justin Fields is not the answer, so I'm going to try something else to see if it's the answer. I get that urge. But if you're just going to get into another one of the bucket of 25 marginal quarterbacks you don't really want, what have you really accomplished? Yes, you're spending a little less money, but you're right back in the same boat, and you're tied to them for the next. You got to give them 2 or 3 years to see if they're going to work it out. If you and I were named general manager and head coach of the Bears, we could probably afford to do such a luxury of just cleaning house and like I'm getting rid of Fields, I'm drafting whatever Jaden Daniels or whatever quarterback we wanted to land on, and go set a new course for the franchise. I'm just saying, if you're Eberflus and Poles, you're in a totally different I don't think you have time to find out that Caleb Williams isn't any good when you have a decent Justin. Would you say that Justin Fields is in the upper half of quarterbacks in the NFL?
I don't know that he's there today, but I think he
in the
could
middle,
get there.
in that 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18
I
range.
wouldn't push back. If you said that, I wouldn't push back against it. No, I think that's fair. 13 through 18, that's fine.
All right. If you have a quarterback that's in that range, do you think if you have a lot of other parts of the team in place that you could win a Super Bowl?
No.
With Justin Fields.
No, I don't think you can. I don't think I don't see that's where I'm trying to go with this. Like, I don't think that unless Fields is making way below market.
All right, hold on. Let me ask this question.
Okay.
Just to set it, because it might change where you're going. Is Lamar Jackson better than Justin Fields?
Yeah.
Markedly better.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think they're a lot closer than most people would give credit for. So, but do you think you can win? Do you think you can win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson?
I absolutely think I could. Yeah. I just think that Ravens off RC, they were right there.
I'm saying if you could get Fields in that similar situation, coaching staff, team, whatever, do you think Fields could get you to the promised land? I don't think a guy like Fields is ever going to win a Super Bowl unless it's an anomaly, because the Super Bowl seems to be reserved for Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow types. But
look, it's a fair point. Like, let's rephrase the question. Could Fields on a team like the Ravens or the Niners win a Super Bowl? Maybe. But see, those teams, like the Niners, for example, aren't paying their quarterback squat, right? And I think that when Purdy gets paid, he could start overcoming those pieces coming down. With the Ravens, right? On the surface, it might seem like they have a lot, but on that offensive line, first of all, is aging. Their running backs are none of them besides I forgot the guy that got injured in the Chargers game that was really good. I forgot his name. Keaton Mitchell. He's really good, right? But then their receivers are so not so great. Like, Lamar isn't really working with that much. You could argue that DJ Moore is probably the best receiver if you pulled all of Lamar and Fields' receivers that they worked with in their career. You could argue that DJ Moore is the best one. So, like, Lamar really hasn't.
Hold on. So, was Rashad Bateman a first-round draft pick?
Either first or second. I can't
First-round draft pick. Zay Flowers, first-round draft pick. Zay Flowers is good. Rashad Bateman is good. They go spend money on Odell Beckham. Yeah. They have Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews goes down. They arguably replaced him with even better tight end. I don't think the Ravens were lacking in weapons for Lamar Jackson. And you don't have to have the greatest, when you have a Lamar Jackson, you don't have to have the greatest wide receiver weapons. Just the same way with Justin Fields. I don't think you have to have the most scintillating wide receiver group, because a lot of the damage that Justin Fields is going to do is he's going to scare you with his feet. And that's a Bears team that was like throttling the Detroit Lions, who should have been in the Super Bowl in the second half of the season, as Fields was starting to get it together, as the defense was starting to get it together. I mean, really, their defense was a ton of injuries early and then got healthy right as Fields came back. And how did they finish? Did they finish the season like 6-2, 5-3?
They finished hot. But one more thing, RC, we're talking about.
I got one for you. I'm gonna go ahead and do yours, but I got
We're talking about Fields today, right? We're talking about Fields 4 years into the league, whatever. All of the trials and tribulations he went through, all those head coaches he had to cycle through, all those Luke Getsy offensive coordinators. And then you have Lamar Jackson.
That didn't help.
2 MVPs, right? And his psyche's down. Fields' morale is nowhere near Lamar. Lamar's right there. And I think that I don't know that Fields could ever forget that or reverse whatever happened to him early in his career. That's always going to stick with him.
I could see that. And I'm not a pro Justin Fields guy, but you'll also know I'm not a pro Lamar Jackson guy. That's why I draw them together. Let me put a different twist on this and see how it lands. You're the GM of the Bears, so you can make this decision. Ownership comes to you and goes, we let the Eberflus thing slide. We wanted you to fire him. You stuck with him. This is your guy. We're in year 3 of this thing. We went out and we let you get Montez Sweat. This team needs to be a winner. Look at how Houston turned themselves around. You need to make the playoffs. I'm just telling you right now, in March 1st of 2024, you either make the playoffs or you're fired. And so is Eberflus.
And I have no rebuttal to that.
And right? I'm going to keep it. And I'm going to keep it. I'm going to keep it simple that way. Would you rather go into this season trying to make the playoffs with Justin Fields or Caleb Williams?
I have no choice. I have to make the playoffs. That's it. Like I can't go up. Okay.
You're fired in humility, or not humility. I forget what.
I'm not taking Caleb. I'm not taking Caleb. If I'm gonna make the playoffs, and I have 1 year, I'm not taking Caleb. I'm not taking Fields either, though. I'm gonna trade Fields. I'm gonna trade out of that pick. I want to trade RC. I want future first.
That's why not your future first. You ain't gonna be there to spend those future firsts if you don't make the playoffs this year. Do you go with a rookie quarterback?
No.
Or do you stick with Fields?
If that's my only 2 choices, I stick to Fields and trade the first round pick.
And my reason for saying that is, and the reason I'm oddly defending Justin Fields, who I really don't like as an NFL quarterback, I like him for fantasy, is I think that GM and coach are unspoken into that world, even if it's not been said to them. I think they fear last year that they were on the brink, that they're going to be on the brink this year unless they do something. And that might be the thing that pushes them to look at the Caleb Williams not doing the medical checks and acting like he's God's gift to football. And I go, are we going to take this guy that's going to scramble around in circles, played terrible every time he played a top 20 college football defense? Are we going to go with the rookie, or do we stick with what we know? And DJ Moore's over here shouting to the rooftops that you better keep Justin Fields.
RC, I'm going to tell you what the move I would have made, and you're going to think I'm freaking nuts for this. If I'm the Bears GM, you give me that mandate. I not only trade that first round pick, I get rid of Fields too, and I get a second for him, whatever. I'm going to use those picks to build my team somehow, some way, whether that's, I'm not saying Justin Jefferson, but maybe L'Jarius Sneed. I'm going to try to bring him on my team, whatever. What I'm going to do at the QB position, RC, I'm going to
with Joe Flacco.
I'm going to give Russell Wilson the vet minimum and pair him back up with Waldron. It worked in 2021. He performed well. I feel like Russell Wilson's conservative play with a good O-line, the right weapons, you load up on defense, that makes me the playoffs. And the Bears were actually one team he was trying to go to when he was leaving Seattle. I know that probably sounds crazy, but I think you have a better shot going to the playoffs with Wilson versus Fields.
Do you use Chat GPT?
Yes, I do.
Not
for that answer, though.
It really helps put your resume together, put the cover letter together for your future endeavors, for the job you'll be seeking in 2025 if you make Russell Wilson your ride or die quarterback.
How would you do it?
I wish you will.
To Fields? That's a
man. I honestly, that would be if my only choice was to go with one of these rookies or to go with the known commodity of Justin Fields, and seeing what was able to happen late last year with the offense, that it was good enough with the defense that Eberflus is going to build, that of a rookie quarterback versus in place Fields, I'd have to go Fields. What I would try to do is I'll just keep going back to it and keep saying it so I can plant my flag in it. So when it comes right, I'll be a genius. Is I'm going after Will Levis with everything that I got. And then if I can't do that, if Kirk Cousins comes free, I'll pay anything to get Kirk Cousins to be my quarterback for this one. If I'm going to live on the edge and have to get through this 1 year, I'm not worried about the future. I'll pay Kirk Cousins his money to try to get through this season. The Russell Wilson angle is interesting. I just think Russell Wilson is mentally shot and is not going to get you over in the year 2024. But it's not crazy talk.
Yeah, I mean, certainly as a $40 million face of the franchise guy going with a fiery head coach like Sean Payton, not going to work. But if he's taking minimum money, I'm interested. But again, it is risky. RC, moving off I think we're going to have a bunch of segments here where in the future where we just start putting our Ryan Poles hat on and debating what to do with this pick. But the combine obviously is ongoing now. I want to give you a chance to tell the audience some of your early observation, what's going on there, and all the latest and greatest from FF Metrics.
Day one, taking in day one of the combine, especially from a fantasy perspective, not very exciting because it was just the defensive players. From an NFL draft standpoint, obviously a little bit more interesting to see how some of these guys were going to come in. But for the most part, my elevator speech for day one would be everything kind of came in as expected. No one who combine shined just shocked everybody. It's like, oh my goodness, I didn't see that coming. The good guys were good. The mediocre guys were mostly mediocre. The bad guys were forgettable, by and large. The only two things I would walk away from as a real game changer things that I saw, or one really, the one main one that rattled me, that made me change course and think I have to go back and relook at this player again. Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman from Missouri who was dominant at the Senior Bowl, had a good 2023 season, was a defensive tackle for multiple years, but not a super productive one or one that anybody was really fired up about. They moved him to a pass rushing edge in 2023, and he had a bit of a breakout season at like 285 pounds. The guy looks like he's 260, but he weighs 285. He's pure muscle. He has great reaction times. He looked great at the Senior Bowl. I was starting to think that maybe he was one of the 5 best players in this draft, quarterbacks included, but especially if you take the quarterbacks away from a value perspective of if I was an NFL GM, what I'd be looking at. He did not look good in this combine. That's probably the biggest shock I walked away from in this draft. There wasn't anybody that I saw that I was like, whoa, I have never seen that before. Where did that come from?
So Dallas Turner running a 4.47 or whatever.
Yeah, I figured that was coming. I was not shocked by that event happening. And I love Latu from UCLA. I think arguably he's the single best player in this draft. You can't draft him number 1, but with the quarterbacks being so weak in this draft, yeah, yes, you still have to play to the quarterbacks, but non-quarterback, Latu may be as good as there is out there. But there was a guy, defensive lineman from Texas Tech that wasn't on my radar that is now Miles Cole, Texas Tech, not Texas. Miles Cole came in at 278 pounds, but 6'6", 278, with like 37-inch length arms, an 86-inch wingspan. Like he's this freak of reach, but he ended up running a 4.67 at 278 pounds with that body. I was shocked by watching him be able to move like that, and considering his movement ability and his long arm. I mean, when he sticks his arm up off the edge, man, good luck trying to throw over the top of somebody with an 86-inch wingspan. So I'm interested to see if he's a lot better, or if this is just a cute combine guy that isn't really going to translate to the NFL. I didn't see, when I did my previews, he did not really
stick out on game
register tape. That I was like, oh man, we got to look harder at this guy. So he would be my biggest upside surprise guy, and Darius Robinson my biggest disappointment. But I'll be breaking it all down, all the position groups, all the days of the combine, all the next week, and all this off season, going through trying to find the proper valuations of talent for the NFL draft, but ultimately for dynasty rookie drafts. Tomorrow I'm coming out with a critique of the current top 12 players that are being taken in early dynasty rookie drafts that are taking place, or best ball guys that are being taken in best ball drafts that are rookies. So I'm critiquing the top 12, what it looks like now, and what, as dynasty owners, we should start to think to do if we possess certain picks in the first round. There are some things that we must do. There's some suggestions, but there's a couple of you must do this. So that'll be out tomorrow with all the other combine stuff.
And if you guys want it, you know where to go. ffmetrics.com. RC does this for a living. He's a professional. He gives you all the best advice, scouting, dynasty drafts. He has it all for the low price. $9.99 a month, RC. You can subscribe to your site.
To test it out, yeah, you can jump in for 1 month at a nice bargain for the amount of work and lack of sleep I have to put in for the last 15 years. because we're ultimately, I mean, I would say you and I are not football fans per se. We are first and foremost fans of trying to make money off of football. That's the more exciting part. Andrew is a better at heart, as am I, but we also do fantasy as part of the betting uh, platform to try to win money. Plus, it's an enjoyable endeavor, fantasy football, dynasty leagues. But our bottom lines are personally made by being right about scouting, not agreeing with everybody else just because they all think Marvin Harrison Jr. is a generational talent and he's not. Just like Bryce Young, you need to know this and you need to know suggestions of what to do with that information, whether that's betting on props against Bryce Young and against the Panthers, like Andrew and I did, and our subscribers did last year, making money that way, not taking him in a dynasty rookie draft, not taking him in a fantasy draft, not taking him at all, but taking the defenses that were facing him because we knew that there was something wrong with Bryce Young, but then gravitating towards CJ Stroud in dynasty rookie drafts. All this not for fun and cuteness of fantasy football. We're trying to win prize pool. We're trying to win best ball. We're trying to win tournament style. We're trying to win DFS. We're trying to win prop bets. We're trying to win head-to-head game bets against the spread, entering circa contests and trying to. So this is about an ROI and profiteering. This is not about fawning over football players and 40 times and how great the mainstream's latest love affair player is, like Dallas Turner will be tomorrow morning.
Yeah, I can already see the headline now, RC, but I think that's a good synopsis of everything going on. So again, ffmetrics.com for all of that, but what's free to you guys? Subscribe. Hit that subscribe button below. We really appreciate it. Leave a comment, drop a like, and we'll be back with you guys next week for even more content. But for now, that's all we got. Have a great rest of your day, ladies and gentlemen.